This is the Digital Mindfulness Podcast with me, Lawrence Sampofo. This is session number 1. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. This is session number 1 of the Digital Mindfulness Podcast. I'm super excited because my guest today is Tanya Schevitz from Reboot, which organises the National Day of Unplugging. It's a day in which, for 24 hours, people are invited to unplug from their digital devices and to reconnect with nature, other people, and themselves. In this interview, we talk about what unplugging actually is and how you can get involved in the National Day of Unplugging. So let's not wait any longer. Let's welcome Tanya Schevitz from Reboot. And actually yours was the first organisation I found that was focused on unplugging. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we have the National Day of Unplugging. It's in its 6th year, and I do think you're right that we kind of hit it right at the point at which people were starting to really think about this, where it became a tipping point in the balance of the use of technology. And so our National Day of Unplugging is a project that is rooted in the Jewish tradition of Shabbat and the traditional day of rest, but that is designed to be taken with a modern lens and open to individual interpretation and for a broad audience. I mean, we recognize that everyone needs a day of rest, and a respite from the deluge of technology that is coming right at us all the time right now. Mm-hmm. So with this recognition that basically people were overwhelmed with the expectation that you would respond to every bing, beep, vibration of your phone, like basically be at the ready to take a call or be responsive at 24/7, that there needed to be a change. And like I said, I think we were at the cusp of this, but since then, I think there's been a lot of discussion about this and a lot of media attention to it, because we have reached this tipping point where technology is now controlling us, really, instead of us having control over it. So, you walk down the street and everyone's got their phones in their hands just all the time. There was this funny video recently of a guy who ran into a bear on a street. Like there was a bear roaming around and there was a news helicopter watching the bear roaming around the suburban neighborhood. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, there's this guy, he's looking at his phone, and he just ran literally right into the bear because he didn't even notice. And I think that that's the case now, is that people just always have their faces buried in their phones, and there's no more of this kind of spontaneous conversation on the street, at the bus stop, or when you're sitting and waiting at a bar for a friend. You're not chit-chatting with the person next to you. You immediately pull out your phone. And so I think that people are recognizing that we're losing something in society from this.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So, I mean, how many people now are part of this National Day of Unplugging or the Reboot organization?
Well, with the National Day of Unplugging, we've had an incredible reach that has just grown tremendously. Last year, we had more than 14,000 tweets that reached almost 30 million people. We had over 500 media stories, broadcast and news stories about it. So it had incredible reach. It reached hundreds of millions of people. But in terms of the actual people who, we know did something, we partnered with 200 organizations around the world who held events that reached 15,000 people. So we know directly people were reached, 15,000 people were directly reached by this. But there were many more who just went to our website or did it on their own, just heard about it on the media. It's hard, to exactly have a number of the people who are participating. But we just think that the reach is growing incredibly as people are just feeling this pressure, And we have this project on our website now where we have people, I don't know if you could see this, we have people who hold up signs that say "I unplug too," and then they fill in their message. This guy said, "I unplug to learn," and this was actually taken at an event where I ran a photo booth and had hundreds of people come and take these photos. People just love to come and unplug and tell you what they like to do. And so we have on our site hundreds, or actually over 1,000, I think at this point, of photos of people who have uploaded their pictures.
That's amazing that it's a global movement, that actually around the world, people are starting to feel this angst, kind of information overload and device overload. And that's absolutely amazing. And also in a very tech savvy place like San Francisco, right?
Right. In San Francisco, of course, we have, it is the thing of the moment. But it is all over the world. I mean, we had, a tremendous number of countries all over the world, like tiny little places, sign on to our website. And I remember a couple of years ago, even already, I got an email from India, from Mumbai, and someone saying, "Oh, we heard about your project, and we are holding an event, and we wanted to get some information, more information, and let you know about it." And I was like, "Wow, that was the first recognition that this was really, we hadn't reached out to them; they were coming to us." So I do think that people are just searching for some solution and some balance. And our message isn't at all that technology is bad. I mean, of course, technology has done tremendous things for society and is a huge benefit and connects us in many ways. I mean, look at us. We're right now Skyping, when we're across the world. But it's more, our message is really to be mindful of your use and make sure that you achieve a balance so that you do take some breaks and that you make sure to make eye contact with people and you have unplugged time where you're having, dinner or a glass of wine, or you're playing a board game with your kids, just spending some time when you're unplugged. And that's important for yourself even so as well. So it's not even just connections with other people, it's having downtime for yourself. So I had this one guy say to me, it was a reporter actually who was writing a story, and he said that he had noticed that on Sundays, he picks up his Sunday New York Times, and he used to just sit and read for hours. And now, every 5 minutes he stops and he checks his Facebook and he checks his email. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I need to put away the phone to read the paper because it's just, I'm distracted all the time." And I think that's become the case for many people. So it's just shifting your mindset really to being aware and making the effort.
So this is totally fascinating. And is this something that you found yourself? Is this one of the reasons why you came to Reboot, that you started to feel this angst and the technology closing in on you and you wanted to do something about it?
Well, I've been working for Reboot. I was part of Reboot. I've been part of Reboot for a decade, but I started working for them. I was actually a reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle for a long time, and then started working at Reboot. And so I came into Reboot, which had this project, was started actually right when I didn't develop the project, right when I started at Reboot, it was launching. So I've been involved since the beginning, and it has certainly made me more aware of my use of technology and the impact, especially on my children. I have two children, 11 and 6. And I think that's where it's so important, especially in today's world, is being aware of the impact on kids. And so for me, I try very hard not to be on the phone when I'm around them unless, there's an emergency going on. But I don't take calls from friends or texts from friends. Occasionally I'll check my work email I'm not talking about on work times. I'm talking about off work times. Mm-hmm. If they're doing something else, but I really try not to pull out the phone. And my youngest son, a call will come in and he'll just go decline and he'll press the red because he knows now at this point I don't pick it up anymore when I'm with them because my feeling, and this is, there's a psychologist, Catherine Adair Steiner, who has said that kids feel second importance to their parents' digital devices. And that if you are in conversation or doing something with your children or with anyone and the phone rings and you pick it up, your message to them is anyone in the world is more important than you. This device rings and I take it, even though we were engaged in conversation. And so it certainly has made me much more aware. And I probably have become slightly annoying to my husband and friends because I try not to be judgmental about it because everyone, has their reasons and people do have to train themselves. But I try to remind them hey, we're in a moment here together and can you be present? And so I just think it's so important. So absolutely, it's made a difference in my life for sure. And my family now takes most of our vacations unplugged. I try really hard to have our digital devices put away, and it really makes a difference.
How do you actually find that when you do kind of go unplugged? I mean, I guess when you go on holiday, that's like going cold turkey, isn't it? How do like yourself and the kids especially? How do they find that?
So it's different for all of us. So for me, I would say the daily thing, I actually do feel more anxiety about. So when I, pick my kids up and I am without the phone, I am, I'm a little nervous sometimes. I'm wondering, and it's just because you have this dopamine rush when you get, that little red dot on Facebook or a text. So I am like, oh, who's texting or who's, what am I missing? But I make a real effort not to touch it. But I feel it. I feel anxiety, and I do feel the phantom buzzing or whatever of like, did my phone just buzz, And I think that's very real. People very much feel that anxiety when they don't have their phones. During vacation, after a day or so we just took a vacation for a week over Thanksgiving for my mom's 80th birthday, and I put the phone away and I did not touch it once. Like, I didn't even take photos. In fact, we have almost no photos
Bravo.
from the vacation except for a few my cousin took with an old school camera, because I never touched it, and it felt so good. And I was really anxious about getting back on. I didn't want to get back on because it felt so relaxed. I felt so relaxed. So after the week, I was like, oh, I don't want to turn this thing back on. But I had to, obviously, for work. But so I think once you try it and you really shut it off, after a few days, you feel good. Obviously, you have to set it up. You can't just disappear. My best friends knew I was gone. The people who knew I was with my family. And my dad, who's not with us, he knew where we were and could call the location if he needed to reach us, So you need to set it up if you're going to go completely off the grid. But if you're going to shut off for a couple hours, you just got to train the people in your lives. I'm not always going to be reachable at the moment you call me. So it's about training the people around you. It's even about training your bosses. So if you constantly respond to your boss, at off hours, you're writing back at 10 o'clock at night. Of course, your boss is going to expect that you're going to be online all the time. But if you start putting in place some boundaries and say, I'm going to be unplugged after 7 o'clock, then they won't expect it. So it's very much about setting it up. You asked about my kids, though.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that I really focus on unplugging on our vacations is because I have an 11-year-old who's totally addicted to video games.
Okay.
And I am a pretty strict parent. And so he doesn't get it that often, or he gets it, minimal, very limited chunks. And, but it's all he thinks about all the time. And honestly, we fight about it all the time because he's always like, when can I get it? And it's like a drug. It really is like a drug crime. So when we go on vacation and have our unplugged vacations, it's off the table. So he can't even ask for it because it's not even a possibility. And so we get along so much better because he's not thinking about it, and he's able to be more creative and think of other things to do. And honestly, he's a nicer person when he's unplugged. So
I want to go back. This is fascinating, and I really want to go back to one of the things you were saying about training the people around you that this is something that you're going to do. Because one of the questions I get all the time is, all right, this is fabulous, but what does a mindful experience or time away from technology look like? And you mentioned just then that kind of talking to the people around you and saying, look, I'm going to be offline and contact me this way if it's really important. But what to you is kind of a mindful experience with technology?
Do you mean like what you do or what you're doing when you're...
Yeah.
I think it really could be anything for what you should look within yourself. And I think that part of the problem is that people don't take the time to think, hey, what's important to me? I mean, in today's world, people never pause. They don't take a moment alone. There was a study out of Harvard and the University of Vermont where they put people in a nondescript room for 6 to 15 minutes. It was varied from subject to subject. And they said, you can sit in this room and be alone with your thoughts for this period of time, or you can shock yourself with this buzzer. And I think 42% of people shot themselves. And for men, it was more than, it was a majority of men who shot themselves, actually. And one guy shocked himself like 180 times or something. People just are so unaccustomed to downtime and alone time that they can't handle it. So I think one thing that's a meaningful mindful, digital free experience is just sitting and thinking. I think that's important. Drive and, just look outside, and think about the landscape in your life and just take some time to actually think about yourself. Take a hike, take up a hobby that's, an unplugged hobby, welding or crocheting or pottery or whatever it is that you're into. I mean, it could be anything at all. Set up times, dates with your friends or regular dates. It really depends what your situation is. But I think there are so many possibilities that people just don't even think about anymore. People are not used to being bored and having to come up with things to do. So I think it's a good practice, to just take some time, some mindfulness time. And I am not a person like, I hate yoga because I sit there and I think the whole time like, oh my God, this is so slow. I need to be working out more. I'm waiting, I don't have many hours in my day. And so like, I need to sweat. And then the 10 minutes at the end where it's like the om or whatever, it's terrible for me because I'm always like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy. Like, but it is important for people to figure out what is their relaxed time. And for me, I do occasionally an exercise class that's a little more intense than yoga, but that's really, I'm totally unplugged and my mind is just racing. I'm always doing the wrong, like I have my hand the wrong way because I'm like thinking, and it's like, wow, that's the only time in my day where I get time for myself that I get to think. And it's powerful. Like I really notice it.
Uh-huh. You mentioned earlier that that around the world there are these other events that take place during the National Day of Unplugging, and you mentioned that with your family that you and your son you get on better when there is no technology around. And what's the effect that you've seen on kind of global communities once they start to unplug?
We've had some incredible experiences. We've seen some incredible things from some of the events we've held. So we held every year we hold an Unplug SF event here, and also we do one in LA, Unplug LA, with an organization called Digital Detox, and they do unplugged retreats and an unplugged summer camp for adults. So the people come in and they have to check their cell phones at the door, and then they come in, there are all these analog activities, crafts. It's really fun to see these adults getting into making pet rocks. And it's really funny. But they're board games and crafts and dancing and a tea lounge and all that stuff. And we do this, the photo booth, the unplugged photo booth. But at that, I was standing in line once at the restroom, and these two young women were in front of me, and they were just standing there, and everyone's standing there sort of uncomfortably because they don't have their phones, right? And so this one woman says to another one, like, okay, so normally I'd pull out my phone right now. What are we supposed to do? And then the other girl said, well, I guess we're supposed to talk to each other. And I was just like laughing because it couldn't have been scripted better, right? This was exactly, and then they started chatting and they started talking about what they'd been doing earlier in the night and what they're doing later. And the one woman said she was going to a concert later. And then the other one said, oh, I love that band. And she's like, oh, come along. And like this friendship was forged that normally would not happen because they would have had their phones out. They're uncomfortable, and it was incredible to see. And another party, we held an unplugged party at South by Southwest, which is in the digital portion of it.
Cool.
And we had 150, 200 people come in for a couple hours and be unplugged. And this one woman came out afterward and she said, oh my gosh, that was amazing. My friends and I had conversations we never would have had with our phones. So it's powerful to see. And it's not that those people, probably went and like unplugged all the time, but they probably realized like, I can be without my phone, and maybe it's enjoyable to actually sit down at a bar or a dinner with friends unplugged. So hopefully they recreated it at least occasionally. And some people, do come out of this experience and decide, I'm going to unplug weekly, for 24 hours, or I'm going to unplug every night for dinner, or, and that's the message we put out is like, set a goal that's achievable for you. Certainly don't say like, oh, the National Day of Unplugging is these 24 hours and I can't do that, so I can't do this at all. It's like, okay, if you can take an hour unplugged dinner with your spouse, partner, friend, or family, like that is awesome. That's a win. That's great for you. And then, build it, like come home and put your phone away for a while in a drawer or something and take some time and read the paper or whatever it is. Just set achievable goals for yourself, and try to keep it up.
It really sounds like what you're encouraging people to do is to get into their bodies more, no? Like to to really, for example, taste food, to use your hands, to touch things, to sense the environment. That's really what it sounds like you're encouraging people to do more, to put the
Yeah.
screens down and do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, like, think about the food today. What do we do with it? We Instagram it, right? We're not really
Yes.
concerned with like, oh, how it tastes. It's like, how's it look? Even my son just recently, he doesn't have a cell phone, but he took my phone. He's like, oh, he was placing this. I made macaroni and cheese, casserole or something, and placed a fork, and he like took that. I'm going to Instagram that. He doesn't even have an Instagram account, but obviously everyone's talking about that now, and so. And of course he didn't actually eat the food, so it's really, and so because he's taking. So it is like about it taking the world in, and I remember reading an article where it was actually the Walkman that first started to disconnect us from the world around us and hearing like birds and the traffic and like walking down the street and actually hearing what's going on. And now, I mean, everyone's got their earbuds in, and they're texting at the same time, and you're absolutely not taking in your community. And so it's really about like, sometimes, not all the time, but just sometimes taking those earbuds out, walk down the street, notice, talk to your neighbors, say hi to random people, pet that dog, just take some time to take it all in.
This really, because obviously myself and you, I'm sure, certainly for me, I grew up in the age when there wasn't so much technology around, right? My mother would just send me and my brother out to go and scrape our knees
Right.
and play football. And so I've actually seen all of this technology kind of start to swamp us all. And I know I often say to my friends that, if we had Facebook when we were kids, it would just be a disaster because it's so compelling and so addictive to use. And I can see it certainly with my nieces and nephews and other kids. But what effect do you think that a digital device is having on families in general?
Yeah, well, it's having a huge impact, really. And I mean, so there are two parts to it. It's the kids that they have grown up, like you said, just completely connected all the time, and they don't run outside. And it's, for me, a total heartbreak that my kid isn't running outside and playing all day. I mean, I was gone for like 12 hours or whatever when I was a
Yeah.
kid, just and my mom would, yell for lunch and yell for dinner, time to come in. And well, we live in the city, so my kid, he's too young to really run free anyway. Just the fact that that's not what he would do. Even if you drive through the suburbs, you don't see kids on the street. They're all inside playing the video games, or on the technology. And the difference in from when we were young too is that, well, we had TV, and certainly, that was somewhat addictive. It didn't go with you everywhere. So you see kids everywhere they go. They've got their cell phones. They're sitting at the cafe together. They're walking down the street together. They've got their cell phones. So that's one thing, is that it's disconnecting them from each other. And also they're not learning the same conversation skills as we did as children. There was a study actually recently that had two groups, and they sent one group of kids away to camp for a week where they had no technology. And then one group of kids, they were just in their normal lives with technology. And the group that came back after just a week could read social cues, facial cues much better than the other group. That's how tremendous the impact is, And kids today, they sit next to each other in the car in the back seat, and they text each other instead of talking. I mean, they don't want their parents to know what they're saying, but still, it's like there is definitely something lost in communication when you're texting. I mean, we've all had the situation where you text something and the meaning doesn't come across right, or you email something, and that's something you have to learn, face to face. So that's one part that's really, I think, impacting kids. But in terms of families, it's absolutely devastating in some cases. I mean, right now it's shifting our whole family dynamic. My husband's a teacher, and I went in to speak with his 8th grade students, but I've spoken with other students. Just 2 weeks ago, I spoke with some teens who all said the same thing. Their parents are completely ignoring them. So we as parents are so concerned with controlling our kids' technology, right? Like I was saying, like my kid gets very little screen time and video game time. But we as parents aren't, in general, thinking about limits on our own technology. So we pick our kids up from school, we're on the Facebook, we're on the texting, or we're on the phone. And these kids were saying to me, one kid after another. And these are kids, who it's not like their parents are, these are parents who are spending a lot of money on their education. So they spend a lot of time thinking about their kids, but they're not actually with their kids, right? So they I'm calling it the helicopter parents who aren't actually there. My friend coined that, like, so we're all helicopters, but we're not actually present. Helicopter parents, but we're not present. So these parents, the kids were saying one after another, the kids were saying, I go up to my dad and I try to talk to him and he's on his Facebook and he's on his email and he completely ignores me and I walk away and I just feel completely alone. I mean, it was heartbreaking to hear. This wasn't one kid. This was the entire class. Kid after kid was like, oh, I have this, and my mom is on her Facebook the whole time during dinner. And like, it was just awful to hear. And these were teenagers. Teenagers don't want their parents on them all the time. So if teenagers are saying they feel ignored by their parents and really disconnected by the technology, then imagine what the younger kids are feeling, So I think it's really something that people have to pay attention to. And I said to these kids, please go home and tell your parents this, because how could any parent hear this from you and not try to make a change at least?
Do you think then, to flip it over, do you think mindfulness, this kind of quality of connecting to nature and connecting to each other at a deep level and kind of being calm and focused at the same time, do you think that can be built into a machine? So do you think, for example, we can have healthy digital experiences, or do you think it requires that kind of balance to really put the screens down for a period of time and then leave them and then come back?
Well, I mean, there's absolutely healthy digital experiences. I mean, there are so many ways like that digital technology can help you. I mean, look at the Fitbit or whatever. Or even just, website. There are so many ways technology can be helpful and healthful and useful, but it's just a balance. I mean, it really is a balance. I mean, anything in an extreme is not healthy for you, right? Sugar, alcohol, drugs, anything. So it's just being mindful of that balance and trying to make sure that you're not overdoing it.
Sure. So how is the day of being unplugged? How's that catching on in a very tech savvy city like California, like San Francisco?
It's tremendous here, so it's coming up. It's March 6th and 7th, 2015, and we're planning for this Unplug SF party on March 6th. And, it's all the people who are coming to that party, they're all young people, very connected, many of them working for tech companies, and they absolutely love it. I think that people are recognizing, that they have an overload. So, and Digital Detox, this organization that we partner with, they very much have a lot of tech people coming to their retreats, from all the top tech companies. And there have been several articles about kind of the tech titans sending their kids to Waldorf school or limiting, not having a computer at home for their kids, or, really recognizing that there has to be a break. So I think that it is catching on. And I think even more so here because it is so overwhelming and so ever present. And so people, recognize they need a break. I mean, there was, of course, a real backlash here against Google Glass. So, there are some political things built in with that because of how the city is changing. But I think people recognize that, just walking around with literally a computer on your face the entire time is taking it too far.
That's really interesting that it's mainly tech people who are sending their kids, to these Waldorf schools or are really interested in unplugging. The very people that are creating the technologies are recognize the need to step away from it, which is something I'm not sure that other people have, that sense that actually, do you know what, we need to kind of step away from this a little bit.
Well, I wouldn't say it's mainly tech people, but there have been these articles about a lot of tech people being aware of it. And I think it maybe is because they see how powerful it is and recognize that there have to be some limits, and it's not to say that they aren't teaching their kids coding or sending them to coding camps, or I'm sure they're making sure their kids are up to speed on all this, but it's just, they recognize there needs to be a balance. So, I think that that's a powerful message for all of us.
Absolutely.
I think that most people, I think that a lot of people don't think about it at all until it's kind of really in their face. And then when they hear this, like, oh, yeah, maybe I should take a break. Like, I see that when I talk to people about it and they're like, oh, I haven't even thought about that. And then, it really makes them, take a pause. This weekend, I ran a craft for kids at a JCC where I had kids making family cell phone sleeping bags. And this one dad came up with his daughter and he was like, oh my gosh, we totally need this. My wife is totally addicted. And he said to his daughter, he said, who's mommy's best friend? And she was like, she's like 6. And she's like, her phone.
Oh my
and
God.
So, yeah, I was like, I'm glad that wouldn't be my kid. Like, that was painful to hear. And so I think that people, are just reaching the point where they recognize, like when they see a booth like that or someone tells them about it, they think, oh gosh, yeah, we do have a problem. And I'll have couples come up to me at my photo booths where I say, hey, do you want to take an unplugged photo? Tell us what you like to do when you unplug. And then the woman will say, or the man, it could go either way, oh, he really needs it. And he'll be like, what do you mean? She's like, you're always on your phone. And then a fight starts, because it's an issue. And lots of therapists are seeing couples coming in talking about this issue of digital overload and someone, in the relationship always being on the phone and disconnecting from the relationship or the partner or the family.
And it's that same sense of disconnection that you described earlier that a child would feel when he gets supplanted by a parent being on the phone, right? The couples feel the same sense of disconnection.
Right? Absolutely. In a relationship, imagine, you're at dinner and you see it all over the place. You're at dinner and one person, it's not many times now, both are on the phones just so they're not talking and they're both scrolling through. And often they're it's not like, oh, I'm, the head of this company and I have got to check this email. They're scrolling through Facebook. So it would be, again, no judgments, but it's like taking the time to think, maybe this is not the time and the place. And I think that as a society, like our norms and what's expected or allowed has really shifted. So acceptable, what's acceptable has really shifted in society today. So now it's totally acceptable to be talking with one person and scrolling through your Facebook or texting someone else. And that just seems bizarre that is okay, that's normal behavior, and that's the message we're sending to our kids, that's totally polite or not polite, but that's acceptable that you could do this,
Mm-hmm. So what is the one thing that you would leave with our audience today? What's the one thing that they could do to kind of have a healthful digital experience, would you say?
Well, I would urge everyone to really take stock of their use of digital devices and think, when is one time this week I can put away the phone for an hour, or 2 hours or however long, 30 minutes, however long it can be. And really then try that and see how it feels and try it again and try it again and try to grow it. And just set aside some times. And it doesn't have to be a regular time, like I do it when my kids get home, but it could be like, okay, I know that once a week I'm going to take a dinner or take a hike that's going to be unplugged, but it doesn't have to be like every Sunday or every whatever. Just work it into your life. I feel like it really needs to be open to individual interpretation to make it work. And so I would urge people to take stock of their digital devices and see what works for them. I would guess that few people would say, oh, I'm totally in control. I think, and if they are saying that, it's likely that they aren't seeing it.
I like that. It's the way that you described it just then. It's very much as if it's a practice. It's something that one builds into their life, and it's actually not about leaving the technology completely. It's about just regaining that sense of control and balance.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
And I think having a discussion with the people around you is so powerful. If people, talk to their kids or they talk to their friends about this, I think it's great. I was speaking with these teens and they said that they sit around and all their friends have their phones out. And so this is like one girl said, I don't always want to have my phone up, but everyone has their phones out. So I feel like it's like a domino effect. You have to, what are you going to do? You're sitting there by yourself. So it's like, if she brings it up with them, like, hey, let's try, to be at the cafe today without our cell phones, or do the cell phone stack where everyone puts their cell phone in the middle, and the first person to touch it has to pay. I said with teens, maybe they should do they can't pay, so maybe have them do something embarrassing, like have to do a little dance in the middle of a cafe or something like that if they touch the phone. But just engage in a conversation with the people around you about the digital use, because I think that helps everyone recognize the impact on themselves and on the people around them.
When you say that you've spoken to a lot of teenagers about this, is that something that, I mean, do you have your Reboot hat on? So that, like, do they kind of like feel led into the question, or is that something that you find that's coming up with them, that actually they do feel the need to want to disconnect and to, or rather reconnect with other people and with nature and with their parents, etc.?
Well, mostly it's been I've had my Reboot hat on, like I'm at an event, but I certainly engage people in this conversation everywhere I am. Like I said, I'm slightly annoying, but try not to be preachy. I just try to engage people in the conversation. But so with the teens, mostly it's conversation. But I usually start out the conversation saying, "Have any of you ever been ignored by someone on a phone?" And they all raise their hands, and I say, "Have any of you ever ignored someone while you were on your phone?" And they all raise their hands. And so then it starts the conversation, and I usually ask about their parents. Do their parents put limits on their technology? Do their parents limit their own? And that's when all that stuff comes out. So, but I just have to ask those few questions, and then they want to talk about it. I had an hour-long conversation with 2 sessions of teenagers 2 weeks ago, and it was just so powerful and just wonderful to hear them thinking about it and talking about it, and hopefully making a change.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or share with our audience today?
I think that's it. I just encourage people to really, embrace it and try it on the National Day of Unplugging. And you can go to our website, nationaldayofunplugging.com, to check it out and get more information.
Brilliant. And when is the National Day of Unplugging again?
March 6th and 7th. It starts at sundown, March 6th.
Brilliant. Well, Tanya Schevitz, thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been wonderful.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Tanya as much as I did. If you want to learn how to unplug and reboot, then check out nationaldayofunplugging.com. If you'd like to get the show notes for this episode, where you can get the links to all of the websites Tanya and I were talking about, then go to digitalmindfulness.net/blog, and you can get all of that information right now. That was such a cool and inspiring episode. I hope it hits the nail right on the head for some of you. I'd love it if you had a second to leave a review on iTunes. These reviews go a long way in terms of exposure, helping new people come along and see that the show is worthwhile, and it helps me stay motivated. I want you to leave an honest review, so if you have some criticisms, please just let me know. I read every single one of those reviews. They automatically come to my email, and I'm super excited to read them. If there's criticism, then I look at them and I apply those things if they're reasonable and justified. I'm always learning, I'm not perfect, and I keep moving forward. Thank you once again for the inspiration you've given me over time. I hope that this episode has inspired you in some way, shape, or form. Until then, stay safe. Thanks, guys.